All right. Uh, so thanks for joining in for the Meetup event hosted by Servicenow and organized by Mulesoft. We have Chari, our South Bay reader, and I just recently joined him. And then we are planning to have more meetups like this, probably once or twice a quarter. So let's see how it goes. And your feedback is really important. So after this meetup, if you can share the feedback, I think there'll be an email sent out today. So if you can send that out, that'll be great. So
feedback, any topics that you guys are that will also help us to divide that.
All right. So how was your day today, guys? Great. Awesome. Cool. So let me start with first question. Probably a bit personal question, but would like to know how much money did you spend today? Does anyone would like to answer it? Any expense? Expense on your girlfriend, gas, anything, beer, drinks? Zero. Oh, that's good.
House at home. Always profit.
All profit. Cool. Did you guys hear the news about Instagram deprecating APIs with an immediate effect? There were a lot of APIs which were deprecated today. So they were planned to be deprecated in, I think, July or something, but they deprecated it. The reason is you guys all know about it. What is it? Not the TLS, the data that is got out of it. So they're getting your friend's data and all that. So the important part which I wanted to actually ask you guys is how many APIs did you use? So does anyone have an answer to it? Like how many APIs did you use today? Thousands. So that's a good answer. Anyone else who wants to answer it? Let's do this. Anyone used 100 APIs? Anyone used a phone, a mobile device? Absolutely. Yeah, so the reason I wanted to ask this question is because things like ML, IoT, AI, they all use APIs, and without APIs or any kind of an integration, nothing can move ahead. So integrations and APIs is so important, but probably it's not discussed as much as ML, AI, or autonomous cars. So I recently came across a company actually, which is a startup called Smart Cars. So they have APIs for exposed for a car, like for example, for a car, get me the data of how much fuel is left and all. So which is good, but at the same time, if they need to be governed properly, so that's very important. But APIs are used everywhere, and unknowingly, you might already be using them. Some introduction about me. I've been in the software company, in the industry for almost 14 years. Started my career as a mobile developer, did a lot of work in Symbian, Windows Phone, or Windows Mobile. I don't know if anyone knows about it. Old palm tops, did a lot of work on that. My gray beard might be telling you that. Moved on to the server side because I realized there are only two things that happen on the mobile. One is a sexy UI, and the other thing is using the SDK functions. That's it. Thought there are more challenges on the server side, so moved to server side with Intuit as my company, class company, where we did a lot of financial services, and we had almost 800 credit unions using our web services. We'll share some experiences with that web service experience that I got. Joined Servicenow in 2014, did a lot of Servicenow app development, loved it, still love it. And then as I was from the integrations, I moved into the integrations teams in Servicenow. So since 2016, we have been using Muelsoft on the cloud side. So that's what we're doing. Apart from work, I do like biking and playing soccer. I've broken my ACL twice, but still like to play it. So I think during the time of the event or when we created this event, we actually specified about 4 major blocks of colors, and we wanted people to tell us like what category they are in. So probably, does anyone want to tell me like if he is in the orange box, the gray, blue, or yellow box? That would really help me a lot in the slide. So
You're missing.
what is that?
I work in a company that has like 6 different graders.
Oh, yeah. So probably the background square is the one for you. So yeah, there'll be people who don't have an integration platform yet. They're looking at various options to go for to build it out on your own. Some people would be looking at already having some options, which is on-premise, want to move on cloud, or it's already on the cloud, but it is highly organized. There are a lot of issues. You cannot control them. There's no governance on the APIs. The other thing is like, I'm not sure. Does anyone feel the yellow box is too common? No, always?
Not always.
Yeah, for us, if we are integrating with any of the apps, so I have my team also with me here, so thanks a lot for the support, guys. So for us, if we want to integrate with any other system, what we do is we think about that system as which is highly unavailable, highly unreliable, and that's how we go forward, because I think that's the best way to move forward with an integration. The other experiences that I found is you have a big integration, development to deployment takes a lot of time. But all these questions actually boil down to one thing, and that is, do you know what is a good integration platform, or what features that it should support to make it a good integration platform? So there are many features that an integration platform should have, but I think I've just listed out a very high level points here. So starting with like, most of the times people think about it as a synchronous API, like you make one service call, you expect a response, but most of the times you need to think about data migration, you need to think about bulk APIs. So a platform should be able to support batch processing. That is a very important characteristics of a platform. Loose coupling. So has anyone heard about the API-led connectivity approach of Mulesoft? So I like that a lot, like where you can decouple a lot of applications, make them into microservices, and then use it so that if anything changes, then we don't have to change a lot. So loose coupling is very important. Again, a platform that helps or enables a user to build out a microservice, and that service can be reused. For example, we have a use case. So I work in the business apps or the IT team in Servicenow, and then we have a lot of customers inside Servicenow using our platform. So one of the very common use cases is address, like validating an address. Is that a right address? So that is like a very small service, but it does a lot of things. And if written properly, it can be leveraged anywhere without any changes. So writing microservices and reusing them is an important thing. Governance, you guys have seen how APIs are built, but how they're not governed properly. If there are any issues like security, threats, and all those things. Example is Instagram, right? You could get your friend's data out of it once you log in. So not you, but anyone who's using the API. So there should be a right control. You should be able to rate limit it. How many of you know the API manager of the Cloud Hub here? I can. Oh, that's a very good number. I don't have to show that. Otherwise, I was planning to show that. So using that is very crucial. So the platform should definitely have it. Analytics is something that is very important. I would also add operation metrics, because you have your APIs, you don't know who's using it, how many APIs have been used, what are the response times, CPUs, and all that for a node or worker that you're deployed it on. It's very important because that is going to help you scaling. Plus, it's also going to give you an idea of when is the peak load, you can do capacity planning around it. And security, again, part of governance. For example, the platform should have a feature where it should be able to do threat analysis like SQL injection, CORS attacks, URS attack. So those things are very important. And I think if you don't have a platform that is doing that, do think about it if it's the right platform, or if you still want to use it, try to see if there's any other platform which can be merged with that, and then you can use it, because these things are very important when you're building out APIs or any integrations. Any questions on this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to correlate
the
API with the address.
Sure.
So let's say you have a QAS or a
sure.
You build a service
Right.
And how do we make sure that it's just my personal question though.
Sure.
Should we go with the Process API to interact with the front end, or directly
so
should we go with the whole process and experience?
I would say if it's a simple API, I would still go with API-led approach.
So does it not make more tasks?
It does. It does. Like per service, probably 300 milliseconds. But if you look at it, if your service is still responding within a good load and probably within 700 milliseconds, I would not consider that as an overhead.
So these things are like big doubt I have.
Absolutely. But on the other side of it, let's say if you are exposing a service which does attachments, or where you have to upload a document, we have that use case, right? In that case, I would not recommend API-led approach, because you're moving a bulk of data, and that data can be huge. It could be 5 MB, 30 KB, or anything. So in that case, just have your system's API exposed, and then, but wherever you're writing it, so because you don't want to lose data and then increase the performance bottlenecks because you're moving a lot of data. So, but I would still have, for small services, if the data end-to-end it's not big, then I would still go with the API-led approach. Because we have, like that was my question too when we actually also onboarded with Mulesoft. So why do you use that? So it's an overhead. But later we found out that we can control it better. For example, systems layer, if you want to change anything, the experience layer will not have to change. So all those API-led connectivity pros will do a lot of that. Any other questions? The next one is about the key objectives. Again, if you're building a platform, if you have a platform, like this is more, I'm trying to get into more depths. Like first one was really high level, someone like product managers or someone who is like a VP could like to know that. Probably this is the next level where we'll have our managers or someone like to know more information about it, because intuitive APIs, I'm not sure if a VP is going to look at it, but yeah, it is very important criteria. So reliability and availability, I'm going to actually show some demos if we get some time on this. I'm going to speak about 2 patterns, so I'll speak more on that in those demos. Intuitive APIs is, for example, if you are trying to get some details like address, try avoiding using the verbs like get me the address or something like that. The API should follow the REST principles. They are widely followed, and anyone who's using it should be using it, should be able to use it. Again, documentation. So I'm not the guy who really loves documentation, so we try to stick with the API console and try to put as in more examples as we can. So a platform serving that is a very good advantage over maintaining documents, sharing it, and keeping versions of those documents. So Mulesoft uses RAML, which is an awesome tool. There are some other tools like Swagger and all those things, which are also really cool and good to expose, because like we've integrated with a lot of companies, and companies do have combinations. So I know that Intuit, Mulesoft are one of the backers of RAML. And on the other side, there's a bigger group also which is supporting Swagger. I think Mulesoft has also came into the open initiative group now. So.
Yeah, so Mulesoft is one of the contributors along with Mulesoft is like one of the spec definer for YAML. So that is why most of their framework or platforms depend on YAML, right? But seeing the Swagger adaptation, they are building up new tools which can translate between these two specs. So that is like an active work. That is what I heard from my Mule contact.
Sure.
So we don't know when it is EA or.
Yeah. So Uri has joined that open initiative group. So that's what I came to know, and that's how I got to know about it. So Uri is the CTO of Mulesoft. So again, you should have a platform where you don't need to do any manual interventions. I'm a guy who supports having a team of non-admins because yes, you need admins, but try to make very least manual interventions, because what happens is if you're doing something like if you want to run a scheduler, you'll have to have some admin team work on it. That's fine. That's totally fine. But if you can automate it using an API, that is something more better approach. Again, the other thing is ease of monitoring. Probably I'll speak more on that. There was a use case where our team wanted, our consuming application wanted an access to our log files. So we said instead of that, because what's going to happen is like if we give them access to the log files, which we can do, but we are not doing any logging on it because of security reasons. So again, whatever you're logging is very important. You should not be logging the transactions of the payload. You can do that in the dev environment, but not on the production. My team will agree more on that. Because what happens is if there's any error, I would rather say that give them the right error message with the details that they need. So for example, if I'm consuming an API, what details would I need? Like what's the error message that needs to be shown on the UI? What's the error message that a developer of that application or consumer is needing? That could be a detailed error message, as an example, like stack trace. Then who's the consumer of that API? Who's the producer of that API? So all those things, probably give them those details as a part of response rather than giving them the logs, because we don't want to invest their time in looking into that. Of course, there are tools which you can build reporting and analysis on, but yeah. Consumer-friendly errors. So does anyone know about 418 I'm a teapot? That's an HTTP error status. So there's an analogy. If you want to make a coffee machine in a teapot, it's going to return a 418 I'm a teapot message. So there is a group who wants to get away with that and is kind of putting some pressure on it, but there is another group who wants to support that response statuses. So keep your statuses, use statuses which are very standard. If you are not able to, if there's a data issue, use 4xx. If there's a server issue, use 5xx. So then, as I said, self-service give errors in the response so that it's not something that you want to them to dig into. And some it all actually, if you have all of these points, you are also investing and you make sure that there is very low maintenance cost, because what we have seen as an experience, there are hardly any apps which have gone live and we had to invest a lot of time in fixing them and patching them. So when you design it well, if your platform allows those features well, you don't have to invest in the maintenance costs. Again, it does not end if integration platform gives you those features. It's up to the developer to actually develop good apps, because like if you are injecting any bugs, it's going to increase those maintenance costs. Moving on, I think the important part of this discussion. again, whenever we design as a team, we look at all these patterns before we actually design. And these patterns are something which we not discuss externally, but we ask some kind of a questionnaire to the teams because not everyone knows these patterns. But for a developer or who is designing this, you should be aware of using these patterns. So timeouts is very straightforward. Like any API you're calling, consider that that API is going to fail. So make sure you have timeout set and probably aggressive timeout set so that your resources are not going to be held up, which is very important. Does anyone know what is circuit breaker pattern? I'm going to show a demo on that, so wait for that. I'm also going to show a bit of demo on bulkhead, so I'll speak more on that later, but those are very important patterns, and companies like Netflix, they do use them a lot. They actually live on these patterns, so I'm a big follower of, there is a page hosted by Netflix, it's called Netflix OSS, open source software. So I think today they just released a open source software which does give you performance analytics like your CPU and all. It's a very nice tool. I just got a chance to watch a 2-minute video, but it's something which is very nice. So I've actually mentioned the link here if you guys get time. I'm going to share this slide deck, so if you want to check, go and check that link. So it's going to help a lot. Again, heartbeats are nothing but pings just to see your service is up or running. So Mulesoft does provide it, but if you want to have something as an external check, like we use SolarWinds today, and just to see if the service is running or not. So those checks are really important because if you know your service, like the best way to know if your service is running is like pinging it, and it could be that the system might be having their own alerts, but it's better to have 2 levels of trust and checking if the service is really running or not. So that's the other important thing. As I spoke about bulk processing, queues and asynchronous communication takes a very important role. And like in one of my examples on bulkhead, I'm going to show you how we're using asynchronous communication or we're using throttling. So there are a few features which Mulesoft released recently in the API manager, but we have developed some of them. So we have not contributed to that, but probably that's one of the experiences that has gone in. So asynchronous communication is very important to us. We try and keep all the bulk APIs async, where we receive a message and we expect the caller to give us a call back so that we can call them back. They don't have to wait until we are processing that. So the Mule's VM is very strong in that, but we also do a lot of bulk processing, and we have very recently gotten Apache Kafka. It's all open source, and probably you guys should have a look at it. It's the best streaming platform, probably, at message bus. Retries, there are 2 parts of it. So you should definitely have retries so that you want to give a service a try, whether it's not working at an extent at a certain time, but probably after 10 seconds it might come up and respond back. So you don't have to create errors or exceptions upfront. It's always good to fail safe faster, but give it a try and then see if you can get a response after some time. So the best way to do that, you don't have to do anything in Mulesoft. You can use the until successful. It's a very strong pattern that they have. It's been there since a while. Like I've been using Mulesoft since 2011. I didn't use it in probably a couple of years in between, but I've seen the transition. Like I've seen how the errors were before and how the errors are now. So it's a very interesting experience which we had, because I remember when I started Mulesoft, it took me like, I was up for the entire night to see why is that error coming. But yeah, now it has improved a lot. So idempotency, I actually missed the point of retry. So in some cases, retries are not good. For example, I have a service where I'm creating a document. If that service is not responding or that has given you a timeout, and if you're retrying again to it, it might happen that it might create another document. And consider this on a financial side of impact. If you're creating a record, it's going to add one more record and you're going to screw up the finances. So retries are again important. So think of them during the design, do socialize about it when you are actually developing those, so that the business or the consumers know when you're going to retry or when are you not. So those things are important. Idempotency, again, as I said, like financial impact, right? If I'm going to create another document again after some time, that service should not create an impact, or it should not create an extra record. So it's important when you design for, you should have a design where it should be idempotent, like you are not creating another record, or you're trying to read something and the results are different, so that is not right. So designing that to that is very important. So if you're consuming a service and if you have a chance to tell them that your service is not idempotent, you basically are telling them that, okay, yeah, this is going to be the problem and it will be good if they can fix it. So this is a very important thing, because this usually happens when there are errors, and we should always think of designing an integration for errors rather than success, because success is going to be like 10% or 15% of the code, but a lot of the code is going to sit in the errors. So that's very important. Any questions? Are you guys, what's the time right now? I just want to make sure we don't, 7 o'clock, okay, sorry. You guys interested in knowing how we actually asked a few questions when we are starting an onboarding? If not, I can just run through the slide. Yes, okay. What is it? The demo, yeah, I'll try to run through fast over these. So let me just see if I can move this. So whenever we are starting our onboarding, we have a questionnaire that we ask, and that questionnaire for us gets converted into tabs on an Excel sheet where we do a lot of things. So first question we do ask is, do you have an integration that is there? For example, if you are integrating with Workday, do you have an integration with Workday already? What are the problems that you're facing right now? Like, what's the value add of using an integration platform? Are you connected point to point to them or not? That is important also, because if we don't want to use that X application later, we want, like, it can usually happen because there are applications coming up which are getting more and more popular. So every 2 years is a cycle where we might change from one app to other. So don't do point-to-point integrations. Then the next question that we ask is, are the users going to see or get our API responses? If not, how is the data going to be loaded into the system? Who's consuming the APIs? Because this actually helps us in giving the responses in that format. So we try to stick with REST over JSON. We always go with that, and then we actually come down to a level where they can, if like SAP, right, they don't support REST. So for them, we have to go with the WSDL approach. So those are the things that are important. Again, if you're going to use, if that consumer is going to use the API, what's the transaction count daily, monthly, or annually? Because some APIs might be only used at the end of the quarter. Some APIs will be used heavily, like address APIs, or in sales world, accounts API, it's heavily used for us. So like we have a dedicated system just for accounts. So just check that, because those decisions are going to drive the core size that we have on the Cloud Hub, and we also run the performance test based on all these. The next question that we ask is, so these questions are not more like a technical questions. These are questions that we ask usually to an analyst or a business who's going to use that API, because we try to understand what is the value they're going to get. For example, we try to give them a set of template that, okay, with this integration, this is how we are handling fallbacks. As an example, Netflix, right, again, going back to it, if you're watching a series or an episode, if you close it, next time you open it, it tries to show it from the where you actually stopped it. But sometimes it does not. Sometimes it makes you go from the start of it, or sometimes it doesn't even show you what episode you were watching, but they never show you an error as such. So it's a kind of an experience which they go with. So think of this when you're designing. So some users might not like errors or alerts. Not a big fan of alerts also. So think of it, and then based on the errors, fail fast, design it. Do ask them what are the manual tasks they are going to do, or they're going to do after the integration. That helps a lot, so that you sell them and say that do less manual tasks, and then you can tell them the ways of how you can achieve that. Yeah, data security and confidentiality. So let's say you're doing an integration with Workday, you're getting a lot of sensitive data from it or sending it. Let's get a confirmation from them, like what kind of data it is, who's going to be affected, are there any federal customers going to use it. So all those things are very important when you're doing a integration. And then probably based on that, you can actually show them a visualization on a very high level on this is how we are going to do an integration. So in this case, Anaplan is an integration. So we have Ashish, who's another South Bay leader. He's from Anaplan, and then recently we are going to go with a use case where we already have an integration with Anaplan, but on a different side. So we came up with this diagram so that the business knows, hey, what's going to happen, like how we are going to pull the request, how it's going to be a persona or an experience that's going to be, how the errors are going to be shown, and then how the data is going to move. So a very high level, nothing too technical about it, but something like this. The other example is probably once you know, okay, you're going to move this data to this system, you can show an object level representation. So this helps a lot because this is one of our biggest integrations, I think, that we are doing. And I think we know that this object is going to be owned by that system based on this diagram, and it does help us a lot because we also try to make sure that the arrows are updated based on the integration. That helps to know, like, because we look at a lot of other projects, and if someone asks us something, we just go back to this diagram and say, okay, we support both bidirectional or it's just one directional. So this actually helps, gives them a good overview. The next set of questions is more kind of a technical, could be the team lead or architect that we are asking the questions on. It's more related to data, like how is the data going to be exchanged, security, then performance, like how much is the TPS and all, more of the technicalities of it, plus how we are going to authenticate, like the business doesn't care about it, but it's really important to know. And like if we are integrating with the system, we also make sure our security team approves that because they look at how we are integrating with the system. We don't want to expose an API which is like doesn't have any authentication or even a basic auth. Basic auth is not good, so you should always look at OAuth and things like that for your authentication. Probably, I'm not sure. Does anyone of you use a hybrid approach for Mulesoft development? I think you guys use it, right?
So on-prem.
On-prem.
Yeah, there are.
Your experience probably.
Yeah, sure. So most of our applications are in Clara, but there are few integrations where apps or the servers behind the firewall, like Workday, like user provisioning, and a new hire and we want to provision them. So we want to create a. So those things we didn't want to have in cloud because and whatnot. So that is why we use an on-prem. So there's just to service one use case just for our IT ops. So we host it. So and the rest of all the other business needs, sales, automatic, whatnot. It's all running Clara.
Any experiences around API Manager? How do you use it?
So the API Manager is mainly on the cloud side.
Okay.
So because the on-prem is like a bulk data movement is what we did from Workday to all the systems that needs an ID to be provisioned. So it's mainly the get worker API that gives us all the stuff, transactional changes on an employee record, and that is what we're thinking of.
Okay.
So
Got it.
no API as such on the
Internal on-prem.
No, whether you want to add on the API manager on the
On-prem. Question. So can we connect a Cloud Hub API Manager to an on-prem? I think we can do it, right?
We can. So
yeah.
just a matter of deploying and proxy, I believe.
Okay, got it.
So
Yeah.
has been Cloud Hub, it just introspects the traffic and it applies all the policy. But the minute it goes out of that VPC or that particular R, then it kind of calls for an intermediate layer like a proxy, which takes and mule code.
Got it.
Yeah, and then it redirects.
Something like a URL endpoint that you give, and then
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. The next set of questions that we often get into is, okay, now we know what data is to be integrated. How should the date be exchanged? Because date is the most common integration. Like we have to move dates from here, an account is created, an order is created. So how do we exchange date? So what we stick to is, or probably most of the web service applications which are enterprise based stick to GMT format. But if there are any applications which need a format in like PST or any other UTC, not UTC, probably India time or any other time, we should generally avoid using those because they actually add a lot of complexity on the user, and then if something changes, we have to, on our integration layer, change them. Sorry, so always stick to ISO GMT time format. Let's also make sure that you're using time component in it, because some integrations analysts might say that we don't need a time. It's like we don't care about it, but time is really important. Like for example, if I'm opening an order here, I would see the time in the date in my time zone. But someone who is in Sydney, you would like to see that the date will be all messed up. So make sure that the time is also sent in. So that's important thing, very important thing. Like a lot of integrations fail during that because of that. Because I've heard people saying that, hey, this date is not right. So we go back and tell them that, hey, this is the problem. Again, IDs or GUIDs. So let's say this is again a very important consideration, because like if a system of record or a master of record is maintaining an ID, it should not have to maintain IDs of the other system. If you're syncing an account or a user, whoever is the owner of the user record, that ID should be moved across, because if you're maintaining multiple systems or each system's ID, then it's going to be just growing as anything. So those things are important. Data mapping, avoid using any hard coding, because that is nothing but patching, and it's something not good, because Mulesoft at the end is a Java app. You can configure it to an extent, but you cannot have a data weave, I think, hot deployed or something. So you'll have to restart our app. So try avoiding those changes. Moving on, I'll just skip this one. I'm also going to skip this because we are around 7:10 or something, right? So I'll be moving on to the demo, which needs a prep presentation, because I want to show more about the patterns and how we use them. I'll take this use case where, around 2013, we were exposing financial service And what happened is around after the time of Thanksgiving, that service was going to be uh, peaked out. So like it was going to be used at a very high peak. On a usual day, we had traffic of around 600 transactions per second. So that was a very peakly, highly used service. So we were using another service, consuming another service to actually expose that service, like we were a proxy or a wrapper around it. And that service was shared with other applications outside our platform. So that service went down, and what happened was, as that service went down, we got continuous timeout, and those timeout resulted in our service going down. Because what happened, like we had a timeout of 60 seconds. Our thread waited for 60 seconds and it just timed out. So we didn't have this pattern that time. So we realized we were at a big fault. So we actually added that pattern. So what that pattern actually does is anyone aware about the circuit? What is a circuit, open, close, in electronics or electrical terms? Like an open circuit is like you're not allowing the traffic or connection, or like you're blocking everything. Closed is when you're actually allowing it, allowing the entire traffic to it. Half open is a term which is used where, let's say you've opened the circuit, but after some time you feel like, okay, let's forward 2, 3 requests and see if it works. If it does not, again open it back or close it. So at ServiceNow, we have not done half open implementation because we felt it's too overkill for what we do. So it's actually a very good feature to have if you're using a circuit breaker. I will show you how we have done that. So we've created a custom connector. I actually wanted to show you that connector on Mule4, which was recently exposed as a GA. So, but unfortunately, they have changed the dev kit implementation to SDK. So that means is you have to recreate the code, and there are some design changes that you have to do. So it's not like an easy transition. So we had to. I went back to the old approach, and then I've actually stuck to that in my demo. So what we look at is like we've exposed 5 configuration points for that custom connector. We've used dev kit to use that, create that connector, where we are exposing attributes like name, where you can give it any good readable name, what type of exceptions you want the circuit to be opened on. It could be timeout, it could be resource locked out, then Java socket connection, concurrent timeouts. It's a list that is expected. The next thing is the rolling window. It is kind of a scale of rolling window that it runs through and sees if there are exceptions, then it's going to open the circuit. I have a diagram to show more on this. Threshold is look out for the last 4 messages and then open the circuit. So that's how this threshold works. And timeout is like once the circuit is open, keep it open for a certain time in milliseconds and then close it again. So these were the 5 attributes that we had exposed. And as an example, here is what it looks like. So let's assume that the arrow, the white arrow, is the response time, timeout value. And if you look at it, the first 4 requests are within that time and they are all okay. So you get a 200 okay. So those are successful requests. But the next requests which are red are actually all timing out. So whenever we get a first timeout, so what we did was, as an example, I had put in a timeout exception. So whenever you get that logic gets a timeout exception, it kicks in its rolling window. And also at the same time, it actually also increases the counter. And what we look out for is in the next 100 milliseconds are those number of errors. So in this case, we got 4 requests which all timed out in the span of 100 milliseconds. So what we did next was we opened the circuit. So any further requests coming in for next 7 seconds were actually blocked and rejected. So we responded back by saying, okay, this service is down, you cannot make any request. So the advantage that we get with that is our threads don't have to wait for that much of time span. So that request, like it's a bad experience, but at the same time, you're saving your system from going down. And system going down is a bigger issue than giving bad responses because it involves a lot of things. Your cache, if you're using heavy on cache, your cache needs to be flushed out and your schedulers kick in again when you have a restart. So this pattern actually helps us a lot time. Sure.
So if you had gotten the first two add network.
Sure, I'll show you that.
Does that reset the window?
So probably something like this. Yeah. So you have 3, then you get a green. It does not reset the window because we have set a rolling window plus a threshold count because we want to look at a pattern, and to identify a pattern, like, we have to keep a combination of checks. So rolling window and the number of count of requests is what we look at. So in this case, only 3 failed and the 4th one was green. So it didn't kick off the circuit breaker. Like, it was not tripped. It was still closed. So that's the pattern that that helps us. So it's very important. Like, even if you have a pattern, you have to tune it and tune it as per your needs. So, like, again, you are not going to stick with 60 seconds timeout. It will depend on an application that you're using. So tuning is very important. Like, even if you have a pattern, if you have a good platform, tuning in terms of performance does help a lot. Sure.
So when you store this information or application, layer or?
We use a in-memory object store. Yes. So Mule does provide an object store where you can do both in-memory and persistent, but in-memory just works great for us, so we use that. Yeah. So that is still a custom connector. We have not found a good out of the box Mulesoft connector, but probably that will go in Exchange at some point of time. So yeah. So for example, if I want to expose a service, right. I'll give you a scenario. Let's say I'll go back to the address validation. Let's say we are using Pitney Bowes service. That service is very strong, but somehow if we are consuming that service and it goes down, then we are going to open the circuit. That way, anyone using our service will not have an impact, like our application will not go down, nor will the Pitney Bowes application will go down. So Pitney Bowes is again an example. We have not seen that. We don't use Pitney Bowes also, but so this actually keeps us safe from going down, like application crashing. It does save us from that. And I would say any integration that you have, you should definitely have a circuit breaker because there should be no exceptions where you're not using a circuit breaker. So there will be some added trade-offs, like there'll be some bottlenecks, like added performance issues.
The circuit is closed, we can also redirect.
Absolutely, we can do that. We could have a reverse proxy app looking at it. If it's a 503, redirect it to some URL. That's something that we can definitely have. And we have a proxy sitting in between our experience, and also we can do that definitely. Yes. Yes. So if I go back to that configuration slide, so that circuit is going to only remain open until 7 seconds with the trip timeout 7,000, and that's configurable. Like, you can configure it based on your needs. Again, that needs a lot of tuning and seeing like how much time you need to keep it open and closed, because it's again debatable. Like, if you cannot go with a single value. It depends. Like, you'll have to run a lot of tests around it to see.
There is no hard date that happens.
No, so we close it at 7 seconds. Yeah. So the other option that we can do is having a half open, probably something like at 3,500, like 3.5 seconds, we can forward 2 requests and see if it works. If it works, forward some more or close it. But I felt like it was a bit of overkill for us. So
and this logic will be there in all the layers?
Yes.
Like process layer will have
Yes,
layers of
absolutely. I'll show you this demo. In that. The next pattern, any more questions? Yes, go ahead. Absolutely, they will get it. They will get, instead of a 504, which is a gateway timeout, they might get a 503 internal service now. So you can configure that however you want. You can do a payload set. But that is more like better than your service going down. Because if your service goes down, they are going to start getting timeouts and they are going to say that your service is not available. So availability is really the most important thing for a platform. So you should definitely have it. It might add an overhead like 100 milliseconds more, but rather I would keep it than having my service not respond. Yeah. You can have an API to override the timeout values. That is one of the options that you could use. But right now, the way we use it is it's a connector. So I'm not sure if it will be like kind of a hot deployment where you change the value and it can change. Well, it's a property right now. We might need to restart it, but I think I've not tried. It should work if you look at it. Yeah, like you can change the timeout value of an HTTP connector on the run, right, on the fly. Yeah, on the fly. Yeah, so this should work. Actually, that's a good test. I'll definitely try that out.
So do you guys use this pattern when you are like somebody? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we use bulkhead more. So this pattern is more where you're consuming an X service and that goes down, and you have to control your app so that it does not go. So DDoS attack, right? That could be a pattern. Yeah, eventually you can apply to anywhere where you are seeing an exception. So this is when this applies. Yeah. You had some questions.
So your in-memory object is essentially just a finite state.
Sure.
Is that right?
That's right.
So you could like add another variable like a packet count.
Yes.
Since the window started, and you could like do every third packet.
Yes. Like yeah, we can do that. Yeah. Absolutely, like a semaphore or something like that. We could do that too. So that's where my next pattern is, which is bulkhead. So I was trying to see if I could get a good boat image or a ship image within Helm, but there were no license-free or commercial use. So I didn't want to go with any of the Google images. I did this myself. So sorry for the drawing, or not sure. It does not look like a Helm though. Oh, it does? Yeah. I didn't use any tools outside PowerPoint, so could have used that like Sketch or something, but I didn't want to waste a lot of time there. So a hull is a base on which a ship or a boat floats on, and then bulkheads is a very old technology, traditionally coming in from China, very old, where all the ships that they used to do by hand or by machine, they would create compartments which were watertight inside that. So if there's any leakage, they could control the leakage only in that area. So I can use the mouse. So let's say, as an example, there is a leakage here, anywhere here. The bulkhead here would control the water not from going to the other areas, because if you didn't have this, the ship could sink in faster. And if you have this, you get a lot of time. Probably Titanic should be having this too. That is from there the name came in as bulkhead. I think it's still being used in the boats, and again Netflix uses it. Something more about the pattern. Like there are two ways of implementing bulkhead. I will stick more on the thread pool executor because that's very easy to implement, and I think with Mulesoft you can like do it in like 15-20 minutes flat. So imagine that you are getting 12 requests at the same time, and your hosting app does not support those many requests. So what's going to happen is if you don't have a pattern like a bulkhead, that app is going to crash, and then eventually it will fall on you and you will be slower. So what this pattern does take care of is, like, let's say, first it creates a thread pool, and then it has a queue associated with that thread pool. So in this example, what I've done is like created a thread pool of 5 and have a queue size of 5. So let's say first 5 requests come in, they go into the threads which are free. If there are any more threads which can handle the request, they go in there. If not, they start filling in the queue, and they are taken from the queue as and when any thread is free and can execute it. Let's say the 11th and 12th requests come in at the same time, and both the pool and the queue are full. What's going to happen is that request is going to be rejected. So that's how bulkhead is actually implemented. 2016, I don't think so we had that at the API manager level, but now we do have something called as, is this my, yeah. Right. Yeah. So we do have a proxy layer, but this example is showing like there's an incoming load, and I wanted to segregate it from a thread pool, basically. So I think with some of the latest policies, we do have something called as throttling, and that is SLA based. So in fact, the simple throttling also works wonders. So you can control how many threads you want your system to accept. Anything above that will either be queued or will be rejected. So there is no control on how many messages you can queue or something. Let's see. How many attempts? Oh, this is an attempt. So like you don't have a finer grained control, but you can develop that pattern using Mulesoft like in flat 15 minutes or something. So it's not a big deal. So again, one cool feature about Mulesoft API Manager is is having that only to a specific API or a resource. So this is like a very useful feature because I can tell you an example again. We were working on that finance project, a banking project, and then the most trend in any application is you have bulk calls made to a GET API rather than update or create API. So we wanted to make sure that, and we found out that creating and updating takes a lot of time. So we wanted to differentiate the number of threads used for an API. And this pattern or this can easily do that. You don't have to code anything. So that's an awesome thing which you should be using. Having said that, let me show you a demo. Before I run that, let me show you how we have put in the code. Yeah, circuit breaker. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Sure. It does, but rather being waiting for, I'd say, waiting for 60 seconds, and seeing that there's going to be a failure, it's better to respond back in 5 seconds and saying that this service is going to fail. So that's how we. Depends on the integration. Like the way we have this is like we have that threshold, right? So even if the customer hits it within that span, he's going to get a rejection. But it does. Yes. So we on an integration we use it everywhere, no exceptions, because we want to save our service from going down. What happens is, let's say at 9 a.m. on Monday, we have I'm a company like GE where people come and log in Okta or I don't want my service to go down for an entire day and then people working on it. But I would be fine having that service not being available for probably 10 minutes or so or 5 minutes or so. That is more safer and reliable rather than that service going down, then you start the problem management, you have the change management meetings, you've tried to identify what the problem, how to restart the service. So that is a big process. And so as to avoid that and keep your service available and reliable, I think circuit breaker always wins for us. That's how I actually, it's always a big discussion around that, like customers don't like it sometimes, but we tell them the importance of it. Yeah. Okay.
You cannot give it a specific time.
Definitely. I do agree. Yeah.
Let's say Amazon.
Yeah.
You can't say, hey, don't buy it.
Yeah.
We have to accept that.
Yes.
How about regulatory?
Sure. So, yeah, what you could do is you could have a bulkhead before the before or after the circuit breaker and save those. But again, what is going to happen is even if you're queuing the request, you're increasing the response time for that. So on an average, there's a study like if you're hitting a button, you expect a response to be in 2 seconds. If it's taking more time than that, then the user is going to be not interested in that. So it's going to add that time, and then eventually, if you know or if you have tried and tuned it, you're going to know that this service is going to fail in 90 seconds. Why to wait 90 seconds also? So again, it's a very debating thing, but the better you tune it can get the customer or yeah, absolutely.
Like a subjective try to give the positive response. Not that plan where you store your request and based on what application is the customer of that API.
Right.
So that shows the so it has to be thought through and just the right.
Absolutely.
Fallback mechanism also can.
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, to add to what Chari said, we try to fail fast using a circuit breaker. It can be an annoying experience, I do agree, but you might not show something like a Netflix. You would not show him where he watched last. You can just start from the first point. So that is another way of doing it.
So you said if you had a path,
yeah.
then you would do a lot of
yes.
Do you have analytics on where your circuit breakers trip and then try to figure out why those tripped and how resource, add resource, scale up?
We do
queues or whatever.
Yes, definitely. So we do have data sent to our Servicenow instance where we are doing all those analytics, but we don't have any mechanism which triggers something based on that analytics. So that is a gap which we are trying to fill in. But yeah, that is a very important thing that you brought up because that would be the complete circle of automation of things. So yeah, yes.
In this case, yeah.
Yeah. I've not seen we change the core size on the fly, right? We cannot do that. We have to do a restart. So yeah, not yeah.
Those can be done.
Yes. I think they're trying to get there. They're doing a deep, heavy investment in Kubernetes, and they are trying to see if pods can be.
I understand from the API perspective that what we're trying to avoid fully have to go through all those meetings or not let our platform go down.
Yeah.
When necessarily it's not our problem. It's back end.
Sure.
But what happens, or you're avoiding, or sometimes they might not find out, and there is a problem in the back end, and to an extent you're saving them from that problem being noticed by the enterprise, so that the back end does fix that.
Sure. So
like, how do we relate to the back end? Hey, we're seeing this. It's not us, but definitely you have to look at your.
Absolutely, it's a very good point. Like we do have that kind of analytics there. So what we do is all our exceptions which we feel are important or which are like catch-all, which we cannot understand probably, we forward them to our analytics, and we have built a custom app on ServiceNow instance or a platform where we actually send these errors to as an API. That platform looks at whether this is type of a message, then it's going to send an Slack notification, or it's going to send an email, create an incident, is something that we've integrated with. So once we do that, our ServiceNow instance actually does a great job in that. We start our on-call. If it's a P1, a call is spun up, and then that call is only spun up for that team. So all that analytics part and part where we actually do our post-analysis comes on ServiceNow. So we do use ServiceNow for that a lot. Yes. I think Splunk does have that analytics also reporting too. So yeah, that's cool. Other part of it is like we've categorized that some errors are errors, but those are data errors, not that important. So we do send like a daily snapshot of errors to those teams. Okay, hey, these are the errors that we got from your platform. You should either look into it or fix it. It's an action that they have to take, and then we open an incident, and then they have to create a problem and associate it, and then share that. So we do have all that set. So back to that, let me show you how we have configured it. So as I said, we use all the 4 or 5 attributes. So we just specify that. We use property file where we have defined those. So like what type of exceptions to look at, the threshold, timeout, the rolling window. And what we have done is any service, like for example, we are exposing a service, so we have put a wrapper around it and then put a connector, so as to make sure that the circuit breaker is there for that service. I think it's already 7:40, so this is one of the outputs that we have. So what I did was I ran a case where that service was timing out the entire time for a span of 5 minutes. What I did was I'm using a JMeter load where I tried to simulate 5 users or 4 users at a time, and then all the calls were either timing out. So with circuit breaker, what I achieved was there were some dips, and that is because like if you see these are 10-second ones. So those are the time that you're giving back to the CPU, so that CPU is free to use its own resources. So you're not blocking the CPU resources, which is very important. So that's the reason we use circuit breaker a lot. The other pattern that we have is the bulkhead. So again, if you are using the API manager, you don't have to really code it, but if you're really interested in configuring the number of queues that you want, then there is something called as a processing strategy. So for every flow, there is a processing strategy, and by default, Mule takes queued asynchronous processing strategy. But in this case, we wanted our own variation of that, so we mapped it to that, and then we also gave some details like, okay, we know that X application can only support 10 threads at the max. So we are actually trying to control that with max threads, minimum threads, like all the thread pool concepts. And then we have some actions like, what do we do if the thread pool is maximum? We wait, and then we have a queue, probably of size 2, where we can queue the messages, or there are options where we can discard about that complete transaction or run it. So these are the options that are there. So this is all with the asynchronous processor flow that we have. And probably non-blocking, that's the recent one, yeah.
Automatic task
Uh,
the request
yeah,
when it's processed,
correct.
the response is ready.
It's kind of a future method, right? The Java future. But that is something that you can use also. But the calling thread will not be freed until that time. Probably in this strategy also it will not be. So yeah, you can probably use that also in that case. Like all have a thumb rule, like all HTTP messages should be non-blocking. Probably that could save all your resources also. Yeah, but one thing which you can't do that is control the limit of the threads, like parallel request with the non-blocking IO. So you might need to go back to this one.
Yeah, that is there with the some
Oh yeah, the HTTP connector level. That's true. Yeah.
So you publish the
Yeah.
caller of the
No. No, it will be still same experience for the caller. He will wait for that time a response comes in, but internally what Mule will do is it will send a request and it will send some header parameters with that request, like a reply to or something. If you debug it, you will see that whenever it makes a request, it adds some headers, and when you get a response from the caller, they map that response to the request, and then they call that. So you don't have to call it, like they just have VMQs, so they use request reply pattern where for the caller it seems like it's asynchronous, but at the end, under the water it is async. That's what it actually ensures. All right. Probably that is about the presentation and the demo. Yeah. Would you have any questions around it? Thank you, guys. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Probably closing notes or something. Thanks for attending the demo. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, go ahead. For example, a callback.
Will all the concepts be same or
So it should apply to everything. For example, if you're using circuit breaker on an asynchronous call, right? You will have to have your flow-based actions. I'll give an example. In a scatter gather component that Mule has. So where you're sending a request to multiple consumers, and then one of them, they respond in any order. So you collect the response and send it. So in that case also you can use it basically, because so this is just a wrapper over the service you're calling. And probably you'll have to set some actions, but those are all up to an integration design that you have to set, like what you should do on this, what you should do on that. So this is just going to wrap the service that you're actually consuming. Hey, we plan to have such meetups probably twice a quarter or something. So feedback is really important. And do let us know if you have anything in mind that you would like to know more on. We'll try to have them answered or have someone from the Mulesoft come in and speak about it. Yeah, you can present it. Anyone can present it. That's true. Right. So from. Oh yeah, a picture. Yes, if you don't mind. There are some Max the Muleys if you want to grab them. We can close it. Yeah. Yeah.
You can put the first slide.
Oh yeah. That's a good idea.
Well, I actually have three.
The one which.
Yeah.
3 to 1 7.
Choose.